recording. We're recording again. Okay, so reading will not always be the main goal of a student. You might have a student whose main goal is writing a resume or writing down their life story. Something different. Maybe they already read pretty well, already speak English pretty well, and writing is what they need. So the emphasis for their lessons might be more on writing. So take a moment to read the objectives for the topic. So far, we focused on listening, speaking, and reading. And now we'll look at how these work with the fourth component of language, which is writing. We'll look at beginning skills and practical writing exercises. Writing includes mechanics, such as handwriting and spelling, as well as rules about things like capitalization, punctuation, and subject-verb agreement. Basic literacy learners often need help with writing mechanics, and sometimes beginning ESL students who can't read and write their native language or whose language doesn't use the Roman alphabet may also need help with this. Reading and writing reinforce each other. People often think that beginning students need to focus only on the mechanics of writing and that they can work on composition later. But it's good to help students realize that whatever they think and say can be written down. When students think of writing, they often explain that they need to learn to spell better as a way of improving their writing. And they may need to work on their spelling, but spelling doesn't need to be a barrier to doing some practical writing. Beginning students can do very simple writing tasks, such as writing individual words or composing short sentences, rather than whole paragraphs or stories. Writing involves brainstorming what you want to say, organizing ideas so that they make sense, creating and revising drafts, providing enough detail to convey the message, and choosing words that keep the reader interested. But all of that goes way beyond what a beginning student is ready to do. So for this topic, we're going to focus only on writing mechanics and very simple composition tasks that will be helpful to our students who are mostly at lower levels. We'll offer more writing composition as a professional development session later on. And also there's more information on composition in the teaching writing handout.
Okay, so the mechanics of writing begins with putting paper to pen to pencil, I should say. About 36% of the world's population uses the Roman Latin alphabet in their writing system. That means about, what, 64% don't. So what are your odds of having a student who is not familiar with the Latin alphabet? They're pretty good. What are the challenges of using a non-Roman alphabetic writing system? Well, there's a few. For one thing, it might not read from right to left. It might read from left to right, or even top to bottom. The characters may not be letters. They may be, as you can see, hieroglyphics or characters. And the characters may look familiar as if they're letters, but for instance, Cyrillic, it's there, but not quite there. So it's got a lot of challenges, and I don't think that you can assume that your student is going to know the Latin alphabet. In fact, I would rather assume and start to teach it and then find out, oh, pleasant surprise, he knows it. Now, just because the alphabet isn't used in writing systems, it doesn't mean that your student may not be familiar with, with the letters, because I used to go over to Africa and I would be in the Kalahari, and I can tell you they knew how to write Coca-Cola. You know, English is all over the place and they're going to be familiar with a lot of letters, but don't let this trick you into thinking that they actually know them and associate them with the proper sounds. Can anybody translate? Oops, sorry. I
I'm
was
sorry.
asked if
You
anybody
weren't
can
ready.
translate that sentence. Go ahead and just hit your space bar and shout it out.
I like to write.
Good, that's right. Good. And what language did you use to get there?
Me gusta escribir.
Good, good. Can you by any chance identify those rating systems?
The top two. And the third is looks like Russian, Chinese,
Arabic,
Russian.
Those like Japanese.
French.
Okay, good. I'm not sure, truly. Okay, Latoya, you think that's Japanese, not Chinese?
It's either Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. I don't know.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not sure myself. And the next one, Arabic, Farsi. You're right. And
French
French
is-
and Spanish.
This is the fourth one.
Good. So you, like I said, you have a very good chance that your student will come from one of these writing backgrounds. Next slide. Thanks, Carolyn. Why are we even teaching writing anymore? You know, a lot of times when I see my kid, they're texting, they're writing on the computer. They don't spend very much of their time actually picking up a pencil and putting it to paper. But here's the neat thing. Research has shown that the brain engages differently when we write something by hand as opposed to typing it in the keyboard. You are involving a lot more area of the brain. Writing improves memory. Students retain learning better, and when they're working with new ideas, they activate analytical centers through handwriting rather than typing. So we definitely want to teach handwriting. And when I say handwriting, I don't mean cursive, I mean printing. You probably know that they barely teach cursive in schools anymore. So stick to the printing. Use a handwriting chart like the one that's here. These are readily available on the internet. You can download them. You can order them nicely laminated. I really do recommend that your student have one of these if there's any problem with writing in the Roman alphabet. Especially if you can find one. If you notice the K, you see the letters with the numbers with the arrows showing how you actually form the letters. First the downstroke, then the two going from the middle line in. This is important in the way that you form the letters. So keep this chart handy and make sure that your student has it to refer to. When you start teaching, don't start with lined paper and little tiny motions. Use your large motor skills. I call it air writing, just like air guitar. So for instance, you go make an A and then the downstroke. Practice it that way using your arm. And then maybe then the next step would be go to the desk. You're still not picking up a pencil, but they're writing downwards on a desk. So you're changing that motion from the air down. Then you might want to start with unlined paper. So now you're going from large motor skills to smaller motor skills. You're still going to use a bit of your arm, more of your hand, and make the letters big on unlined paper. The last step would be to use the lined paper where you're using mostly your wrist and not much of your hand. Secondly, or thirdly, whichever, I forget, you don't need to teach the letters in alphabetic order. In fact, you should teach the letters that they're interested in. For instance, how do you write your name and your address? You can teach those letters first. There's a lot of guidance on the internet about the order for teaching. A lot of people now, they used to say, teach the letters that are formed in the same way, but now I see them more likely to want to teach letters like SATIPN, because you can make almost 1,000 words with these few letters. You can start teaching word families. So I would definitely just use those common letters first and don't worry too much about the J and the Z until later. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so let's assume that you've been very successful, which I know you will, and they know their letters and they can say them and they know their sounds associated with them. What activities can you do? For a very beginning student, you'd probably want to start copying words, short words, and then focus on those words that are similar. So they might write bar, bat, bad, so that you can, because it's hard sometimes for them to see, oh, this is an R, and the R can look very much like a T when you're printing. So that would be your practice. When they're getting better at that, the intermediate student, for instance, can start copying short sentences, things that they're likely to need and use where is the bank, anything like that. They can also complete and rewrite sentences. You'll see that there's a lot of activities where there's blanks and they can fill in the blank, write the word, and then copy the whole entire word. When they're a little bit more advanced, they'll be able to put 4 or 5 sentences together. They can copy those paragraphs. This is great because they can then look at the paragraph and you can now sneak in some grammar without them even knowing it. Ask them to look at the letters, the capital letters, and circle the capital letters. You're not overtly or you're not explicitly teaching grammar. You're still teaching writing, but have them circle the punctuation. Ask them, what is this mark? Why do you think it's there? So it's called teaching through usage rather than rules. So you're combining writing practice with grammar that way. Next slide is yours, Carolyn.
Yes, it is. One of the reasons some people don't like to write is that they say they're not good spellers. So it's very useful to help students find certain spelling patterns, such as the vowel consonant E that we mentioned when we talked about syllables in the last session. For instance, in words like rate and bite, the silent E at the end of the word makes the previous vowel say its name. You can teach this spelling pattern and then have the student use these words when they write. However, there will still be some words that students have difficulty spelling. They're just strange for whatever reason. When this happens, you can try a multisensory technique using as many senses as possible for teaching them to spell the word. This helps them to remember how to spell it. Let's practice how this works with the word straighten. First, I'd like you to get out a pencil and paper and write the word straighten on the paper in rather large letters, at least half an inch tall for the short letters. Make them big. And then I'd also like to have a volunteer that will answer questions aloud. I want all of you to talk while you're muted, but I'd like somebody to be the student and answer aloud if you would. Who would like to do that?
I can do it.
Do it.
Okay. Who was that?
Abby.
Abby. Okay, good. All right. All right, so all of you talk along, even though we can't hear, but we'll be hearing Abby. In a remote lesson, you could spell the word aloud for the student to write down. That would be the best option for the student to do the writing, or you could write it up. You could write it and hold it up to your camera or use a whiteboard app. So here we go. First, simply look at the word. Now read the word aloud.
Straighten.
What parts are spelled as they sound?
10.
Okay, how about the S?
Yeah,
Your
I guess the first 4 letters, STRA, stray.
Okay. And then you have a T, another T that is as it sounds.
And then TEN, 10.
Okay, what things look unusual?
The GHT.
Okay. What about that I in there?
Yeah, I guess that one too.
Yeah, AI, okay. And then are there any special parts like prefixes or suffixes?
I guess the EN is kind of like a suffix.
Yes, okay, great. All right, now read the word again aloud.
Straighten.
Okay, now as you look at the word, say the letters from left to right.
STRAIGHTEN. Okay,
now trace the letters with your finger on your paper as you say them again.
STRAIGHTEN.
and read the word again.
Straighten.
Okay. Now close your eyes and picture the word in your mind and try to spell it out loud as you're picturing it.
Straighten.
Okay, and now write the word from memory. And then check it against your model.
Okay.
Okay, so that was a lot of repetition, which certainly helps you remember things. But we spoke it, and thereby hearing it, and you wrote it, and you did all this, and you traced it, you did all these things at the same time, which makes it multisensory and helps you to remember it. Okay, so that's for the hard words. All right, as Lynn mentioned earlier, we can write letters in the air. That's one way of making writing practice multisensory because it's using those large muscles that provide an additional pathway to the brain that helps the student retain what they learn. There are other ways to make writing practice more multisensory by using tactile techniques. Slide shows using needlepoint fabric on a word that's written on a piece of paper. So you put the needlepoint fabric over the word on the paper and you can see the word written. And the student can trace over the letters and feel them because of the texture of the fabric. Now, of course, for online lessons, this is not probably going to happen. So the student can use any textured surface, such as a piece of carpet, sandpaper, or their pants leg, or as Catherine mentioned before, your inner arm is very sensitive and the pads of your fingers are sensitive. So the two together make a good combination. And while they're doing this tracing, they're looking at the word written on a piece of paper. So if you were doing straighten, for instance, that you wrote before, you're looking at it while you're tracing. This uses several senses at once. It also helps to speak and hear the letters of the word in order to help remember how to spell it. Another good activity is to use letter tiles, such as Scrabble tiles or bananagram tiles or magnetic letters. You can do this in an online lesson if the student has some sort of letters at home they can use, such as alphabet refrigerator magnets. At first, the student can be looking at the written word, and they should say the letters aloud as they move the tiles into the correct order. And then they can try it without the written model. This is a fun activity, and it can be less intimidating than writing on paper. You're not committing quite as much as you do when you write it down. And correcting mistakes is easy. So the student can follow up by writing the word on paper. You can also do this in online versions. There's a website called spellingclassroom.com that is on the last slide.
Okay, what is a sentence? This sounds like a strange question, but my husband, who teaches university, will tell you that after he runs up to 5 examples of sentence fragments, he just puts a big red X against the paper and he sends it back and says, do it again. So there's a lot of people who are not sure what a sentence is. Just for review, I think we need to, okay, a sentence is obviously a complete thought. It has a subject and a predicate. You don't have to teach those words to your new student. You can say that a sentence is a complete thought. It talks about who and what, and then what happened or what they did. So there's always 2 parts to the sentence. Who did it happen to, and what was it? I'm gonna pick on Sarah. I'm gonna unmute you, Sarah, because you're right there in my list. Okay, can you unmute yourself? Thanks. Okay.
Yep.
What is wrong with these sentences and quotes? What about number 1? Can you read number 1 and tell me what's wrong with it?
The people in the back of the line. It tells who, but it doesn't say the what. It doesn't have a verb.
Great, great. Now, and how about number 2? Can you do that one?
Rush to the gates on Main Street. So it has the second part of the sentence, but not the subject.
Okay, it has what happened, but not to whom or how. This is a great activity to just find simple sentences and leave off parts of it, and then ask your student to fill it in, so that until you get to the point where you're sure that they understand, you know, yeah, sentence has two parts. Don't worry about adding prepositional phrases or compound sentences. Just keep it very simple. Simple subject, simple predicate, maybe an object. Okay, next slide. Another sentence building activity is to start with a very brief, maybe this has 5 words, the boy threw the ball. And then for a beginning student, you identify the nouns. Ask the student, what of these words describes a person, place, or thing? And they should be able to say boy and ball. Then ask them to add a word that describes the thing. And it could be, for instance, tall, short. What kind of ball? Is it a soccer ball, a baseball, a red ball, a blue ball? They can make as many sentences as they want. For a more advanced student, you might want to add an adverb in there. Ask them, what's the action word in this sentence? What did the boy do? And then have them come up with a modifier. Eventually, when you've got an advanced student, you might want to add a preposition, so that you've got eventually the tall boy quickly threw the red ball to the girl. It's a little more exciting for them when they can get to the point where they're adding modifiers. I wouldn't go too far, too fast. Just make sure that your student is ready for that next step. But that's a fun activity. And you can even make weird sentences. The cat attacked or maybe the bird bit the dog, you know, something a little bit crazy that they can then have a laugh over. Next slide.
Okay, as students become more comfortable with copying sentences and start to write phrases and sentences on their own, they may worry about making spelling or grammatical mistakes. They may become too concerned with the technical aspects of writing and lose sight of the fact that writing is a tool for communicating ideas. You want to try to keep a balance between communication, creativity, and writing mechanics. And you can use techniques that help the student to focus on small aspects of composition or grammar without becoming overwhelmed with either one of them. Sentence starters, such as those shown on the slide, provide parts of sentences and the student completes the rest. They're different from fill in the blanks in that the student has more control and can be more creative. There are lots of right answers. Sentence starters can be combined with other writing techniques, such as using photos or models to help the student do more creative writing. Another way to encourage more independent writing is to have students answer questions. You can show students that they can use the words from the questions to form their answers. For example, you could write the question, where do you like to eat? Most likely the student will respond with a word or a phrase like Wendy's, not a complete sentence. Tell the student to put that word or phrase in a sentence, such as, I like to eat at Wendy's, pointing out that the phrase like to eat is in both the question and the answer. You can ask questions like those on the slide and others about things in your environment or photographs or any topic. Just make up questions. Don't forget that there's a lot more detail on how to do these activities in the handout about teaching writing. Don't worry about trying to remember all of this. Our purpose is just to make you aware of the many options there are to teach writing.
One more thing that it's always good to do with beginning and intermediate students is to work on templates and models. Sometimes there's a confidence factor with your student and they might be afraid to write a note to their teacher. But what if they had a nice template like you've got here that says, dear, and of course what you do is you teach them that anything in the brackets is going to change. Everything outside of the brackets will stay the same. And so that they can learn to just put the teacher's name in, please excuse their child's name. These templates are wonderful. You may also find a case where, like for school absences, I know in my grandson's school, they have to actually report it by email. unless, you know, or call it in. So there may be a time where you will want an email template. It's just there to make it available. Remember that also you could use an information grid. Have the student create an information grid, for instance, with the name of their students. And then the next column would be their teachers' names. And the next column might be their grade levels, all printed out in English, so that when they do the template, they can look at the information grid and just put the right information in. It's really handy. And you can also do this for thank you notes or cover letters. You know, the more sophisticated the student is with the language, the more advanced the template can be. Carolyn, thank you.
Okay. So this brings us to the end of the writing topic. The beginning student may need help with the mechanics of writing, spelling, basic sentence construction, and practical aids for everyday written communication. And we've tried to give you ideas for each of these, such as the sentence frames and questions and answers and models, information grids, and templates. Here are 3 websites with interactive practice activities that you can do with the student or that they can practice on their own. And they give immediate feedback on correct answers. And I'm just going to show you one of these. So we have a sentence jumble, and it's really easy. Where, well, if it would work, where are your glasses, and etc. So it has that sort of thing in it that you can use as an activity with the student, and they can actually do it themselves. Okay, so this one, the mixed up words, is the same idea, except it's the letters in a word. And the writing practice helps you put, plug in words in blanks. You know, it gives you a list of words and you can put them into the correct sentences.